I woke with my right hand buried in wet grave soil and the taste of iron at the back of my throat. That was my first clue that I was not where I was supposed to be. My second clue was the open coffin beside me. My third was the lantern light moving between the cemetery's black yew trees. I knew that light. I knew the 6 men carrying it. I knew what they would find in my coat pocket in less than 3 minutes. My name was Senna Vale. I was 26 years old, a junior verification clerk in the Royal Cemetery's Death Records Office, and I had returned to the night Lord Archivist Merrow framed me for stealing 12 royal burial seals. The first time, I had panicked. I had tried to explain why I was standing beside an open military grave after midnight. I had insisted I had received an unsigned inspection order. I had begged them to compare the handwriting. None of it mattered. The seals were found in my pocket. The inspection order vanished. Merrow testified that I had recently complained about my salary. 3 officers swore I had asked how much noble families paid to alter burial records. 5 days later, while the capital celebrated the royal memorial ceremony, I was executed in the eastern courtyard for tampering with the sanctity of the dead. I remembered the blade falling. I also remembered what happened afterward. Death did not take me somewhere warm or peaceful. It dropped me beneath the cemetery, into the buried halls where forgotten soldiers stood in silent ranks. There were hundreds of them. Not monsters, not mindless corpses. Witnesses. Men and women who had died under royal banners, only to have their names misspelled, their service shortened, their pensions redirected, or their families quietly erased from the ledgers. I had spent what felt like years among them before the world pulled me backward. During that time, I learned 417 names. Not just names, either. I knew regiments, dates of death, next of kin, pension amounts, commanding officers, the clerks who certified the records, the noble accounts where the money had gone. Lord Archivist Merrow had built his fortune by stealing from people too dead to complain. Unfortunately for him, I had returned with 417 complaints. The lanterns were closer now. I pulled my hand from the soil. Something pale came with it. At first, I thought it was a finger bone. Then it unfolded in my palm. A quill. Its shaft was smooth and bone-white, its tip narrow and silver. No feather, no ornament, just a tool made for writing things that polite society preferred to leave unwritten. I recognized it immediately. The Archive Quill. I had seen it in the underground halls after my execution, resting across the hands of a stone archivist whose face had been worn away. The quill could record testimony from the dead, but only willingly. It could not command a spirit. It could not invent a statement. It could not drag truth from someone who wished to remain silent. That limitation had seemed frustrating in death. Now it felt like a promise. A boot crushed a twig behind me. Clerk Vale. I turned slowly. Deputy Warden Pell stood at the edge of the grave with 5 cemetery guards behind him. His narrow face held the careful disappointment of a man who had practiced looking betrayed. "Step away from the coffin," he said. I obeyed. In my first life, that was when I started talking. This time, I said nothing. Pell descended 2 steps into the grave trench, holding his lantern high. Its blue flame illuminated the brass plate fixed to the coffin lid. Sergeant Orrencald. That was wrong. His name was Orrin Caldron. He had served 19 years in the 9th River Regiment. His widow had received exactly 4 months of pension payments before the Death Records Office marked her as deceased. She had actually lived another 11 years. I knew because I had met her ghost beside her husband's. Pell looked at the broken soil around the grave and then at me. We received a report of unauthorized excavation. "How fortunate you arrived so quickly," I said. His mouth tightened. A guard searched me. He found the velvet pouch in my inner pocket. 12 royal burial seals spilled into his palm. The guard stared. Pell released a slow breath, as though I had personally forced him to feel disappointed. "Senna Vale," he said, "you are under arrest for grave tampering, theft of restricted seals, and attempted alteration of a royal military record." The first time, those words had ended my life. This time, I looked down at the coffin plate. Then I felt something cold touch my wrist. A whisper rose from beneath the lid. Not sound exactly. Recognition. I wrapped my fingers around the archive quill. "Before you arrest me," I said, "cemetery procedure permits a verification clerk to correct an exposed burial name error." Pell's face went still. He had expected pleading. He had not expected procedure. "That record is already certified." "The coffin is open to inspection," I said. "The brass plate says Orin Cald. The ledger says Orin Cald. But the regimental death roll lists an Orin Cauldron. If they are the same man, the burial name is incomplete. You are in no position to make corrections. I am still employed for another few minutes." One of the guards snorted. Pell did not. He knew the rule. A clerk's authority ended when charges were formally entered at the gatehouse, not when evidence was found. I stepped toward the coffin. Pell blocked me. I met his eyes. "Deputy Warden, you can arrest me now. But if you prevent a lawful name verification while a military grave is exposed, your refusal must be entered in the memorial audit." The royal memorial ceremony began in 5 days. Every burial ledger would be opened for inspection. No official wanted his name attached to an unresolved military grave discrepancy that week. Pell moved aside. Reluctantly, I placed the quill against the brass plate. "Sergeant Orin Cauldron," I whispered. "If that is your true name, and if you wish it restored, give me leave to record it." For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the coffin knocked from within. Once. The guards froze. The archive quill moved in my hand. Not like a possessed weapon, more like a compass finding north. Its silver tip touched the brass. White lines spread beneath it, delicate as frost. The missing letters appeared. REN. The plate now read, Sergeant OREN. A pale figure rose through the coffin lid. He wore the remains of a military coat. One sleeve was missing. His expression was tired, stern, and unmistakably aware. He looked at me. Then he saluted. The guards stumbled backward. Deputy Warden Pell went so pale that the blue lantern made him look dead too. The ghost vanished after 3 seconds. But something remained. A narrow band of white script circled my wrist. Orin Cauldron, verified witness, one oath unresolved. I felt it settle into my bones. Not raw power. Authority. The right to call one willing spectral witness. In my first life, Merrow had buried me before I understood what the dead could do. This time, his first mistake was leaving me beside the right grave. His second was assuming the dead had forgotten their names. They still arrested me. Regression, as I learned very quickly, did not make iron restraints more comfortable. The guards escorted me through the Royal Cemetery's north gate, while Deputy Warden Pell carried the 12 seals in a locked evidence box. Rain began to tap against the gatehouse windows, and the cemetery bells marked midnight with 12 low notes. Under ordinary law, I should have been taken directly to the palace holding cells. Pell did not do that. He put me in the records quarantine room. That told me 2 things. First, he was frightened by what he had seen. Second, Merrow had not instructed him what to do if the corpse answered. The quarantine room was designed for clerks exposed to cursed documents. It had 1 chair, 1 table, silver-threaded walls, and a ceiling painted with prayers against contagious memories. I sat there for 47 minutes. In the first timeline, I had spent those 47 minutes shouting through the door. This time, I studied the white name around my wrist. Most magical cultivation in the capital was obvious. Battle mages refined elemental cores. Oath knights strengthened vows through service. Noble mediums inherited spirit contracts through bloodlines. Archive cultivation was considered barely magical at all. Clerks earned tiny amounts of authority by certifying births, deaths, marriages, and inheritances. That authority let us open sealed ledgers and detect crude alterations. It did not let us fight. It did not earn respect. Most people thought archive magic existed to keep ink dry. They were wrong. A verified name created identity. A verified oath created obligation. A verified death created jurisdiction. By restoring Orin Cauldron's name, I had not merely corrected a plate. I had reconnected a person to his service, his family, his pension, and the promises made to him by the crown. That completed record had granted me one thread of necromantic authority. Not ownership of Orin. The dead were not property. It granted me standing to request his testimony. There was a difference, and the difference mattered. The door opened. Toma slipped inside carrying a bucket and a stack of burial cloths. He was 19, broad-shouldered, permanently muddy, and officially employed as a junior gravekeeper. In the first timeline, he had been the only person who tried to visit me before my execution. They had turned him away. 3 months after my death, he had discovered irregular pension tokens beneath the western ossuary. Merrow's men had accused him of grave robbery. Toma disappeared before his hearing. Among the oath-bound dead, I had learned that he was buried outside the cemetery wall without a marker. Seeing him alive made something in my chest loosen. He put down the bucket. "You look different," he said. "I'm covered in grave soil. You're usually more nervous when people accuse you of crimes." That happened often. "You work for Lord Merrow." "Fair point." Toma glanced toward the door and lowered his voice. Pell sent a messenger to the archivist's residence. The messenger came back alone. "Merrow is on his way." "How long?" 20 minutes, maybe less." I stood. Toma stared at the band of white script around my wrist. "What is that?" "Sergeant Orin Cauldron." His expression changed. Unlike the guards, Toma did not recoil from the name. He bowed his head. "I've cleaned that grave for 3 years," he said. "The plate always felt wrong." That was Toma. He could not read high archive script. He had no cultivation worth mentioning, but he treated every grave like someone might return and ask whether it had been cared for properly. I trusted him because the dead trusted him first. "I need you to do something strange," I said. He looked at the silver-threaded walls. "Stranger than helping an accused seal thief escape a cursed record room." "I'm not escaping. That is somehow worse." I told him to go to row 9, grave 63, and check whether the offering bowl contained 3 old copper buttons. Then I told him to bring me the smallest one. Toma did not ask how I knew. That was another reason I trusted him. He left through the service door. 8 minutes later, Lord Archivist Merrow entered through the main one. He wore charcoal robes lined with red silk and a silver chain bearing the royal cemetery key. His gray hair was perfectly arranged despite the rain. Merrow never looked hurried. He believed urgency was something that happened to poorer people. Deputy Warden Pell followed him. Merrow dismissed the guards, then placed both hands on the table. "Senna," he said quietly, "what have you done?" It was a lovely performance. Concerned supervisor, betrayed mentor, patient nobleman faced with the disappointing criminal tendencies of a low-born clerk. I had believed it once. I corrected a burial name. His eyes flicked to my wrist. Only for a moment. But I saw the fear. He knew what archive authority looked like. Perhaps he had never seen it form around a living clerk, but he understood enough to recognize danger. "You were found with restricted seals." "Yes." "You admit it." "I admit they were found." Pell shifted behind him. Merrow smiled faintly. You should think carefully before playing with words. I have had a great deal of time to think about words. 5 years, a public execution, and an indeterminate period of spectral imprisonment, but I decided not to be dramatic. He opened the evidence box. The 12 seals lay inside. Confess, he said. Tell the tribunal you acted alone. I may be able to persuade the Crown to commute your sentence to permanent record service. Permanent record service meant having your memory stripped and bound into a copying desk. He was offering me a longer execution. No. His expression barely changed. Your situation is serious. So is an incomplete military burial name during Memorial Week. The silence sharpened. I continued before he could interrupt. Sergeant Orrin Cauldron's identity has been restored. His pension file must now be reopened under Cemetery Law 14. Merrow's smile vanished. Cemetery Law 14 was older than the current dynasty. When a military burial identity was corrected, every connected record had to be re-verified. Service history, death certificate, pension beneficiary, officer authorization, transfer accounts, all of it. Merrow leaned closer. You are under arrest. You have no authority to reopen anything. Not yet, I said. That was when the service door opened. Toma entered, wet from the rain, holding a tiny copper button. He set it beside me. Merrow stared at him as if a shovel had learned to speak. I picked up the button. The royal crest had worn away, but the underside carried a scratched number. 9. Orrin Cauldron's regiment number. In my first life, Orrin had told me he placed that button in his offering bowl every year, hoping someone would compare it to the false death record. No one had. Until now. I touched the Archive Quill to the button. Orrin Cauldron, I said, will you testify that this token belonged to you in life? The air turned cold. The quill wrote one word across the tabletop, in white light. Yes. Pell backed into the wall. Merrow did not move. But I heard his breathing change. I looked at him. The royal memorial ceremony is in 5 days, I said. All burial ledgers will be opened. You will not be present. Perhaps not. I smiled. But Orrin will. Merrow had me transferred to the palace, holding cells before dawn. That would have worked if he had been dealing with the woman I used to be. The woman I used to be believed official procedures protected innocent people automatically. The woman I had become understood that procedures were tools, like shovels, like knives, like quills made from bone. Their morality depended on who held them and whether anyone bothered to check the records afterward. My cell contained a stone bench, a water basin, and a barred window overlooking the cemetery's eastern wall. At 7:00 in the morning, a tribunal clerk arrived to take my initial statement. His name was Brannick. He had ink on his cuffs and the exhausted expression of a man processing 60 cases before lunch. He placed a confession form on the table outside my bars. State your name. Senna Vale. Age. 26. Occupation. Junior verification clerk, Royal Cemetery Death Records Office. Charge 1. Theft of 12 royal burial seals. How do you plead? Request verification of seal custody. He looked up. That is not a plea. It is under archive procedure. He sighed. Most people hated clerks because clerks knew exactly which boring rule could ruin an otherwise efficient morning. On what basis? The seals were allegedly found in my coat at 12:06 in the morning. Their withdrawal ledger will show who signed them out before that time. The evidence report states you removed them. Then the ledger should agree. And if it does, I will enter a plea. Brannick rubbed his forehead. Charge 2, unauthorized excavation. Request grave opening order. Charge 3, attempted alteration of a military burial record. Correction completed under exposed record procedure, witnessed by 6 guards and Deputy Warden Pell. He stared at me. I stared back. Finally, he collected the blank confession form. You realize delaying entry does not help you. I'm not delaying. What are you doing? Organizing. That was the first day, my new cultivation path. Not meditating beneath a waterfall, not swallowing a glowing pill, not punching a mountain until it respected me. I filed 3 requests. The palace was required to send copies to the Death Records office. Merrow would intercept them. I knew that. I wanted him to. At 9:13, Toma appeared outside my cell carrying clean burial linens for the prison chapel. He had been reassigned there by Deputy Warden Pell, probably to keep him away from the cemetery. Merrow thought removing Toma from the graves weakened us. Instead, it gave us access to the palace. Toma passed my cell without looking at me. A folded strip of linen dropped from the bottom of his stack. The guard ignored it. I picked it up after Toma turned the corner. Inside were 3 items. A pencil shaving, a thread of blue military cloth, and a list of 6 grave numbers. The first belonged to Oren Cauldron. The second belonged to Corporal Jessa Venn. The third belonged to Banner Medic Halric Sorn. I knew all 6 names. More importantly, I knew what linked the first 3. They had allegedly died on different dates. Their real deaths occurred during the same retreat at Bren Ford. Their commander, Captain Edric Vey, had certified 3 separate death certificates over a period of 11 months. That allowed Merrow to redirect each pension through different offices, making the theft harder to detect. In the buried halls, Jessa and Halric had stood beside Oren. 3 witnesses to 1 fraud. The Archive Quill warmed in my hand. I laid the blue thread on the bench. Jessa Venn, I whispered. I remember your name. If you are willing, show me where your death record broke. The quill did not move. That was its limit. The dead could refuse. I tried again with Halric. Nothing. I closed my eyes. In the first timeline, I had learned their names after death, but knowing a name was not the same as earning trust. Why would they speak to me? I had worked in the office that erased them. I had stamped copies of corrupted ledgers without noticing the pattern. Ignorance did not make me innocent in their eyes. So I did not ask for testimony. I apologized. I should have checked, I said. I saw irregular dates. I saw pension files closed without family signatures. I told myself senior clerks must have verified them. I was afraid of losing a job that paid 18 silver crowns a week. That fear cost your family's years. The prison corridor remained silent. Then the blue thread lifted. It curled across the bench into the shape of a river. 3 pale points appeared along the southern bank. The quill moved. Retreat order altered. 16 white letters burned into the stone. A woman's hand appeared over mine, translucent and scarred. Jessa Venn stood on the other side of the bars. Her spectral uniform was soaked. An arrow shaft shimmered near her shoulder, indistinct and mercifully bloodless. She looked at me for a long time. Then she tapped the word altered. Once, the name around my wrist widened. A second line formed beneath Oren's. Jessa Venn, verified witness, service order unresolved. I felt another thread of authority join the first. 2 witnesses. Halric still did not answer. That was his right. I spent the next 4 hours reconstructing the Bren Ford retreat from memory. No paper. No official ledgers. Just the dates I had repeated among the dead until I could recite all 417 cases. Oren Cauldron, 19 years of service, pension value 32 gold crowns monthly. Jessa Venn, 11 years, 21 crowns. Halric Sorn, 8 years, 18 crowns. Combined theft over 14 years, 11,928 gold crowns, excluding survivor allowances and interest. That was only 3 soldiers. Merrow had erased hundreds. At 2:40 that afternoon, Brannock returned. He looked less bored. The seal withdrawal ledger is missing. Missing from the shelf. Missing from the office. And the grave opening order. No order was filed. Then someone sent me an unauthorized instruction. He lowered his voice. Lord Merrow submitted a sworn statement that you must have destroyed both documents. I almost admired the efficiency. Almost. Has he signed it? Yes. Under full archive oath. Brannock hesitated. Yes. There it was. Merrow's next mistake. A sworn archive statement could be challenged by 3 verified dead witnesses if the dispute involved death, inheritance, burial rights, or military pensions. He believed dead witness law was ceremonial. Most people did. Spirits rarely manifested clearly enough to testify, and noble mediums charged more than poor families could pay. Merrow had spent 22 years stealing from people who could not afford to summon the dead. He did not yet understand that the quill had changed the cost. I looked at the empty space where Halric had refused me. 1 witness restored his name. 2 had shown me the altered retreat order. I needed 3 to expose the forged death certificate. I had 4 days left. That evening, Toma returned with prison chapel ashes beneath his fingernails. He stopped beside my cell while the guard inspected another corridor. Grave 63 was searched, he whispered. They smashed the offering bowl. Merrow. His private clerks, 4 of them. Good. That meant he was frightened enough to destroy evidence. Bad. That meant the dead would see exactly how far he was willing to go. Did they disturb the neighboring graves? Toma's jaw tightened. 7 markers knocked over, 2 cracked. I wrapped my hand around the quill. Toma looked at the names on my wrist. Can they hear us? Some of them. Tell them I'll repair every marker. A pale shape appeared at the end of the corridor. Halric Sorn wore a medic's sash across his chest. He looked at Toma, then at me. The quill wrote across the cell wall. Not for you. I swallowed. I understand. Halric pointed at Toma. The quill continued. For the keeper. Toma could not see the words clearly, but he saw my expression. What did he say? He believes you. Halric offered his hand. I touched 2 fingers to the cold outline of his palm. The 3rd name formed around my wrist. 3 witnesses. 3 unresolved oaths. And enough legal standing to make a forged death certificate speak. The hearing was scheduled for the next morning because Merrow wanted the charges entered before I could request a memorial review. He believed speed favored him. It did in my first life. This time, speed merely brought him to the wrong room faster. The preliminary tribunal chamber was small enough to feel private and official enough to ruin someone permanently. A royal examiner sat behind a blackwood desk. 2 palace recorders occupied the side table. Deputy Warden Pell stood near the door. Merrow sat opposite me wearing his cemetery chain. He had chosen blue robes that morning. Blue signified administrative neutrality. Merrow enjoyed dressing as concepts he had never practiced. On the table lay the 12 burial seals, my unsigned inspection order, and a certified copy of Sergeant Orrin Cauldron's death certificate. That last item interested me. The original death certificate recorded Orrin as Orrin Cald. It claimed he died of fever in a military hospital 43 days after the Brenford retreat. Captain Edric Vey had signed it. So had a physician named Dr. Selm Rusk. The signature was forged. Rusk had died 2 years before Brenford. I knew because his ghost had complained about the quality of his own funeral wine for what felt like 6 consecutive months. The examiner read the accusations. Merrow gave his statement calmly. He explained that I had shown an unhealthy fascination with restricted military ledgers. He said I had asked questions about unclaimed pensions. He said my low salary and lack of family support had made me vulnerable to temptation. That part hurt more than I expected. Not because it was true. Because in the first timeline, I had wondered whether everyone believed it. I had been an orphan. I rented a room above a candle shop. I owned 3 work dresses and 1 pair of good boots. Merrow understood that poverty could be presented as evidence of moral weakness when the right people were listening. The examiner turned to me. "Clerk Vale, do you deny possessing the seals?" "No." Merrow's mouth softened at the corners. "Do you deny being present at Sergeant Cald's grave?" "Sergeant Cauldron's grave," I said, "and no." "Do you deny altering the burial plate?" I corrected it under exposed record procedure. The examiner tapped the certificate. "Lord Merrow maintains the shorter name, matches the certified death record." I challenged the certification. That wiped the smile from Merrow's face. The examiner frowned. "On what grounds?" "Fraudulent medical witness, altered date of death, pension diversion." Merrow laughed once. Not loudly. Just enough to make me seem absurd. "Senna," he said, "you are attempting to turn your criminal hearing into an audit." I looked at him. "You train me to follow procedure." It was the closest I came to thanking him. The examiner asked for evidence. I placed the bone-white quill on the table. Merrow's hands tightened. "This artifact appeared at the grave," I said. "It records only willing testimony from the verified dead." "A necromantic object?" the examiner asked. "An archive instrument." "There is no distinction," Merrow said. "There is," I replied. "Necromancy commands remains. Archive law recognizes identity." One of the palace recorders nodded before catching himself. Merrow noticed. So did I. I requested permission to invoke Cemetery Law 14, subsection 6, testimony regarding military burial fraud. The examiner studied the law index. Merrow objected. The examiner overruled him. That was the beautiful thing about obscure laws. Powerful men ignored them until someone less powerful learned the page number. I touched the quill to Oren's death certificate. "Sergeant Oren Cauldron." "Corporal Jessa Venn, Banner Medic Halric Sorn. You are not compelled, but if you are willing, testify to the date and circumstances of Sergeant Cauldron's death." The chamber temperature dropped. The lamps dimmed. Oren appeared first, standing behind my chair. Jessa formed beside him. Halric came last. 3 ghostly soldiers in damaged uniforms, silent and clear. Deputy Warden Pell made a choking sound. The examiner did not move. Merrow did. Only half an inch backward, but I saw it. The quill rose from my fingers. It wrote across the death certificate in lines of white fire. ORREN, CLDREN died A.T. Bren Ford. No fever. No hospital. Date altered by 43 days. Captain VEY ordered false certification. Dr. SELM Rusk was dead before signature date. The forged physician's signature blackened. Then it peeled away from the parchment like burned thread. Underneath was a second layer of ink. A transfer authorization. Pension beneficiary changed from Mara Cauldron, lawful widow, to the River Veterans Custodial Fund. The fund's controlling officer was Lord Archivist Merrow. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Merrow stood. "This is theater." The 3 ghosts turned their heads toward him. He sat down again. The examiner asked whether the witnesses could answer questions. "They may," I said, "if they choose." Merrow recovered quickly. He always did. He argued that even genuine spirits might be confused. He claimed battlefield deaths distorted memory. He suggested the artifact could be influencing them. That was clever. So I did not argue. I asked Halric a question. "Who treated Oren Cauldron before his death?" The quill wrote. I did. What injury? Crushed RIBS, internal bleeding, alert until final minute. Did he state his name? Yes. Did he state his wife's name? MARACLDREN. The examiner compared the answer to an old regimental family registry. It matched. Then Jessa testified that Captain Vey ordered survivors to list Bren Ford casualties as delayed deaths. Oren confirmed that Vey had promised the unit their families would be paid. The forged certificate cracked down the middle. Not physically. Magically. Its certification seal split into 3 gray fragments. A false death certificate had been exposed by 3 verified dead witnesses. My third milestone should have felt triumphant. Instead, I watched Oren stare at the pension transfer and felt sick. He had died believing his wife would be protected. For 14 years, his stolen service had financed Merrow's estate, carriage, cellar, and blue administrative robes. The examiner ordered Oren's file reopened. Merrow objected again. This time, the examiner ignored him. Then I did something Merrow did not expect. I asked to return to work. The examiner stared at me. You remain accused of seal theft. Yes, and the memorial ceremony begins in 4 days. Cemetery Law 14 requires the verifying clerk who restored the identity to conduct the connected record review. Merrow's face hardened. That is impossible. Then appoint another clerk, I said calmly. But the 3 witnesses have already accepted my verification authority. Replacing me may require their consent. All 3 ghosts looked at Merrow. The examiner cleared his throat. I was released into restricted cemetery service pending investigation. Merrow was ordered not to interfere with the Cauldron review. I knew he would interfere. That was the point. Before leaving, I gave him one warning. Do not erase another name. He looked at me as though I were still the frightened junior clerk he had hired for cheap labor. Be careful, Senna. The dead are not the only ones who can testify. No, I said, but they are the ones you forgot to bribe. The Death Records Office occupied a long gray building inside the cemetery's western grounds. It had 86 windows, 14 archive vaults, and a roof that leaked directly above the pension appeals desk. Merrow's office was on the 3rd floor, far from both the leaks and the public. Mine was in the basement. When I returned, the other clerks stopped writing. There were 23 of them in the Military Records Division. Some looked frightened, some curious. 2 looked disappointed that I had not been executed quickly enough to create a promotion opportunity. Senior Clerk Amias met me at the stairwell. He had testified against me in my first life. Not falsely, exactly. He told the tribunal I had accessed pension ledgers after working hours. He neglected to mention Merrow had ordered me to do it. This time, Amias held out a new assignment sheet. Lord Merrow has placed you on isolated verification duty. Of course he has. You are not to access active ledgers, seal cabinets, account transfers, officer files, or correspondence. What may I access? Unresolved burials. I almost smiled. Merrow had confined me to the most powerful records in the cemetery because he believed unresolved meant useless. How many? Amias handed me a key. 412. The number sent a quiet thrill through me. I remembered 417 stolen soldiers. Oren, Jessa, and Halric were among them. 412 unresolved military burials remained. Merrow had given me the entire rebellion. The basement archive smelled of dust, damp stone, and old lavender oil used to keep memory moths away. Shelves stretched through 11 narrow aisles. Each contained gray burial packets tied with black cord. No noble names. No decorated generals. These were infantry soldiers, wagon drivers, medics, scouts, stable hands, cooks, and conscript mages. people whose families lacked the money to challenge official records. Toma waited beside the sorting table. He had been assigned to supervise me. Merrow considered that an insult to both of us. Toma looked around at the shelves. What do we do first? We organize. He appeared mildly disappointed. You summoned 3 ghosts yesterday. And today we alphabetize. Power is often less glamorous than people hope. I explained the pattern. Merrow's network had stolen pensions by breaking identity chains, a missing letter in a surname, a false death date, a widow marked deceased, a child classified as unrelated, a regiment transferred to a non-existent command. Each error isolated the dead from the promise attached to their service. The Archive Quill responded when those broken connections were repaired. Every completed record granted me authority with one willing spectral witness. Not control. Not ownership. Standing. Toma arranged packets by regiment while I matched names from memory. By noon, we found 17 duplicated death numbers. By 2:00, we found 9 widows declared dead before their husbands. By 4:00, we found a pension fund that received payments for 63 soldiers supposedly buried at sea. All 63 were buried under numbered stones in the cemetery's southern field. At sunset, Toma and I went there. Rainwater shone between the graves. The stones had no names, only numbers from 8801 to 8863. I remembered every person beneath them. But remembering was not enough. They had to choose to answer. I began with number 8814. Private Loran Pell, I said. 3rd Supply Cohort. You died during the South Pass winter evacuation. Your sister Nemi was listed as your beneficiary. Nothing happened. I continued. Your pension was redirected to the Maritime Loss Fund because your death record falsely states that you drowned. The soil trembled. A young man appeared beside the stone, carrying the translucent outline of a broken wagon harness. The quill wrote his name across the blank marker. Loran PLL. A white line joined the 3 names around my wrist. 4. Then 5. Then 7. Not everyone answered. Some graves remained silent. Some spirits appeared, but refused testimony. One woman manifested long enough to turn her back on me. I accepted that. Consent was the foundation of the quill's power. If I treated willingness as an inconvenience, I would become another Merrow. By midnight, 12 names had been restored. The authority inside me changed. I could feel the cemetery as a network of unresolved promises. Each grave was a sealed document beneath the earth. Each name was a key. Each oath was a thread. The next morning, Merrow sent an order limiting us to 10 packets per day. I complied. Exactly. We processed 10 official packets. Then Toma repaired grave markers, which was not packet work. As he restored the stones, I requested testimony directly from the dead. Merrow had restricted paperwork. He had not restricted conversation. By the end of the 2nd day, 26 witnesses had accepted me. That was when Merrow changed tactics. He came to the basement with 2 royal inspectors and announced that the unresolved packets would be moved to secure storage. I watched his private clerks load boxes onto carts. Where are you taking them? I asked. Vault 14. Vault 14 was fireproof, spirit-proof, and accessible only with Merrow's personal key. He smiled. You requested proper handling of sensitive records. I am providing it. Malicious compliance works both ways. The difference is that Merrow still thought paper was the record. The dead knew better. You may move them, I said. His eyes narrowed. He had expected resistance. Toma, I added, please help them. Toma looked at me, then nodded. For 3 hours, he carried boxes to Vault 14. While doing so, He quietly read every grave number written on the packet's spines. That evening, he recited 74 of them to me from memory. I matched 40 to soldiers buried in the eastern terraces. We visited those graves after dark. Merrow had locked away the documents. He had also gathered the names into one convenient list. By dawn, 40 willing spirits stood around us. The air shimmered with pale uniforms, spectral tools, broken banners, and quiet faces. I felt their names circle my arms, cross my shoulders, and settle down my spine. The authority no longer felt like threads. It felt architectural. A wall waiting to be built. We discovered its purpose when Merrow's men arrived. There were 8 of them, wearing cemetery security coats with no insignia. One carried a null bell designed to disrupt spirits. Another held a seizure order declaring the Archive Quill an unauthorized necromantic weapon. The order bore Merrow's signature. The lead officer reached for me. I did not raise my hand. I did not cast a spell. I simply said, "Those willing to preserve their records may stand." 40 ghosts moved. They formed 4 rows between us and the officers. A wall of pale soldiers. No weapons drawn. No violence. Just presence. The officer rang the null bell. The sound struck the archive wall and vanished. He rang it again. The bell cracked. White script spread through the air. 40 VRIFID witnesses. Record seizure contested. Protective standing granted. The officers could not cross. Every time one stepped forward, the ground returned him to the edge of the path. The dead were not attacking. They were enforcing jurisdiction. Toma stood beside me with his shovel over one shoulder. He looked at the silent formation. Is this normal archive work? No. Good. I was worried I'd chosen a dull profession. The officers retreated. One left the seizure order on the ground. I picked it up. Merrow had signed personally. He had now attempted to seize a lawful testimony instrument in front of 40 verified military witnesses. The memorial ceremony was 2 days away. And for the first time, I felt certain I would survive it. On the 3rd morning, the Crown suspended my criminal hearing. Not dismissed. Suspended. Royal institutions rarely admitted they had nearly executed the wrong person. They preferred phrases like pending broader evidentiary review. I had no objection. I had already died once for their convenience. I did not need an apology before breakfast. Merrow remained in office. That surprised Toma. It did not surprise me. Lord Archivist Merrow had served 3 kings. He managed noble crypt access, inheritance certifications, military pensions, royal funerals, and the sealed burial contracts of 17 great houses. Removing him, without proof, would freeze half the capital's succession system. Merrow had made himself indispensable by controlling the paperwork required to replace him. That was intelligent. It was also why his collapse needed to be public. The royal memorial ceremony would begin in 48 hours. At noon on the 5th day, every military burial ledger would be opened in the Hall of Remembrance. The king's ministers, noble officers, pension trustees, widows, representatives, and foreign military envoys would attend. Cemetery law required unresolved claims raised during the ceremony to be heard before the ledgers could be resealed. Merrow had always treated that rule as ceremonial theater. Families submitted petitions, clerks promised reviews, musicians played, the books closed. This year, the petitioners could speak for themselves. But first, I needed proof tying Merrow directly to the stolen accounts. Ghost testimony could establish false death records. It could not, by itself, prove where every coin had gone. The dead knew what they had been promised, not how Merrow laundered the theft afterward. For that, I needed the Black Ledger. In the first timeline, I learned of it from a spectral accountant named Vessa Crow. Vessa had worked for Merrow for 16 years. She recorded the transfers, created false custodial funds, and balanced the stolen pensions against cemetery maintenance accounts. When she threatened to report him, she died in what official records called a carriage accident. Her spirit refused to join the oath-bound soldiers. She remained beneath the death records office, guarding the ledger she had helped create. Vesa did not trust clerks. Understandably. At midnight, Toma and I entered the basement furnace room. The official plans showed solid foundation beneath it. The actual floor contained a burial hatch disguised as a coal plate. I knew the release sequence from the first timeline. 3 taps near the hinge, 1 at the center, then speak the name of an unclaimed debtor. The hatch opened with a sigh. Stone steps descended into darkness. Toma lit a grave lantern. Does the cemetery have many secret underground rooms? More than the palace has legitimate budgets. We descended 39 steps. The chamber below was lined with shelves carved directly into the earth. Blank account books filled them. At the center stood a desk. Vesa Crow sat behind it. She appeared around 50, with severe features and translucent spectacles. An iron accounting chain wrapped around her wrists and disappeared into the closed drawer before her. She looked at me, then at the Archive Quill, then at the names covering both my arms. "No," she said. Her voice sounded like pages turning. "I haven't asked yet. You came for the ledger." "Yes." "No." Toma shifted beside me. I sat on the floor. Vesa frowned. "What are you doing?" "Waiting." "For what?" "For you to believe I will not force you." She laughed without humor. "That quill cannot force me." "I know." "Then leave." "No." The chain around her wrists tightened. The black ledger was not merely evidence. It was her unresolved contract. Merrow had made Vesa sign every false transfer. The archive magic treated her as a participant in the fraud. She believed releasing the ledger would condemn her. In my first timeline, I had judged her for that fear. After being executed because I signed documents I did not fully inspect, I had developed a more complicated opinion. "You helped him," I said. "Yes." "You knew families were losing pensions." "Yes." "You also tried to stop." "Too late." "That matters." "Not to the law." "Then the law is incomplete." Her expression sharpened. Clerks generally did not say such things in archive chambers. I placed Orin Cauldron's copper button on the floor. Then Jessa's blue thread. Then Halrick's medic clasp. 3 tokens. 3 people whose stolen pensions appeared in her ledger. "I will not erase your part," I said. "I will not call you innocent, but I will record the moment you refuse to continue." Vesa stared at the tokens. I signed 417 transfer entries. "I know every name." That shook her. I began reciting them. Not all 417. That would have taken hours. I spoke the first 20. Then the next 20. Infantry soldiers, archers, medics, wagoners, stable hands. At name 63, Vesa closed her eyes. At name 108, the chain loosened. At name 201, she began whispering the beneficiaries after me. At name 300, other ghosts appeared along the chamber walls. At name 417, Vesa opened the drawer. The black ledger lay inside. Its cover was dark leather with no title. Silver account lines glowed along the edges. Vesa did not hand it to me. She placed both palms on it. "I testify willingly," she said. "I created the false funds under Lord Archivist Merrow's instruction. I recorded every transfer. I retained the controlling signatures. I attempted to submit the ledger to the Royal Treasury on the 7th day of Frostwane, 14 years ago." "What happened?" "Merrow stopped the carriage." She looked down at the chain. "He offered me money first, then protection, then absolution. When I refused, he arranged silence." The Archive Quill moved. Her statement appeared on the first blank page. The iron chain shattered. Vesa stood. Her name joined the others around me. But unlike the soldiers' names, hers settled across my palms. Vesa Crow, verified witness, account of complicity completed. The black ledger opened. Lines of gold and red spread across 417 entries. Total stolen principal, 3,804,672 gold crowns. Interest owed to families, 2,119,406. Property purchased through related accounts, 11 estates, 4 warehouses, 2 river barges, 31 bond certificates, and 1 vineyard Merrow publicly claimed had belonged to his grandmother. Toma leaned over the page. Did his grandmother have excellent handwriting? She signed with Merrow's personal seal 18 years after her death. That seemed suspicious. A little. We copied nothing. Copies could be challenged. Instead, Vesa agreed to carry the ledger herself. At 3:20 in the morning, the building shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Merrow had activated the furnace purge. Every archive building contained a last resort system to destroy contagious cursed records. It filled the lower chambers with white fire. Using it without royal approval was punishable by loss of office. Merrow had decided the risk was worth it. Heat roared above us. Toma looked toward the stairs. Can the ghosts stop fire? Not ordinary fire. The names around my body tightened. 40 spirits could form a defensive archive wall. But there were 78 willing witnesses in the chamber now. More waited in the burial halls beyond. I understood the next stage of my cultivation. A record was not protected by paper. It was protected by continuity. I placed both hands on the black ledger. Everyone who wishes this testimony preserved, I said, stand as its chain of custody. The dead formed ranks. Not 40. 112. Soldiers surrounded Vesa, and the ledger in concentric lines. The white fire poured down the stairs. It struck the first rank and divided. The second rank absorbed the heat. The third carried the record backward through memory. Names flared across the walls. Each witness became a living seal. The fire could burn paper. It could not burn 112 independent testimonies, agreeing that the paper existed. When the flames died, the chamber remained. The shelves were untouched. The black ledger was cold beneath my hands. Above us, every alarm bell in the cemetery began to ring. Merrow had started the purge. He had also triggered an automatic royal investigation. 29 hours remained before the memorial ceremony. The trap had closed. He simply had not reached the part where he could feel it yet. Lord Archivist Merrow spent the final day pretending nothing had changed. That was his greatest talent. The cemetery swarmed with royal investigators. Treasury officers sealed the furnace controls. Palace clerks questioned Deputy Warden Pell. Guards searched Merrow's office. Merrow attended meetings, signed schedules, approved flower placements for the ceremony. He even issued a formal memorandum reminding staff that unverified spectral disturbances should not interfere with dignified public service. I admired the phrase. 112 witnesses and a recovered fraud ledger had become a disturbance. By sunset, 3 noble families offered to sponsor Merrow's legal defense. By midnight, 2 withdrew. At 6:00 the next morning, the River Veterans Custodial Fund stopped processing transfers. At 7:15, Merrow's vineyard manager attempted to empty the estate treasury. The Royal Bank froze the account. At 8:00, Merrow sent senior clerk Amias to negotiate. Amias found me in the eastern terraces with Toma, restoring the name of a cavalry scout named Rila Das. By then, 163 spirits had accepted verification. Some followed visibly. Most remained as names in the authority surrounding me. Amias stopped several paces away. You have made your point. I'm working. Lord Merrow is willing to withdraw the charges. How generous. He will restore your position. I already have my position. A senior position. Toma continued brushing moss from Rila's marker. Amias lowered his voice. Senna, be reasonable. The cemetery cannot function if every old discrepancy becomes a public scandal. It functioned poorly when the discrepancies were private. You know what I mean. I did. He meant institutions survived by controlling which truths became urgent. The memorial ceremony begins in 4 hours, I said. You should find your seat. His face tightened. Merrow can still destroy you. He tried. That was before you embarrassed him. No, that was why he framed me in the first place. Amias went still. In the first timeline, I had not understood Merrow's timing. Why frame me that night? Why risk planting seals and opening a grave? Because 5 days before the ceremony, I had prepared a routine discrepancy note on Sergeant Orrin Cauldron's file. I had not recognized the whiter fraud. Merrow had. He killed me for noticing one missing syllable. Amias looked toward the pale figures standing among the graves. I only told the tribunal what I saw. You told them I accessed the ledgers after hours. You did. On whose order? He looked away. I could have threatened him. Instead, I handed him a blank witness declaration. You may submit a corrected statement before noon. What happens if I do? You live with having corrected it. And if I do? You live with that instead. He took the form. At 10:40, Deputy Warden Pell arrived under guard. He requested to speak with me privately. The investigators allowed it because 40 spectral soldiers surrounded us, making escape seem unlikely and irony seem plentiful. Pell removed his hat. Merrow told me you were stealing seals. You planted them. His face sagged. He said the investigation order was lawful. He said the seals would be removed before the arrest. But they were not. No. Why? I don't know. I do. He needed physical evidence. Pell looked toward Orrin's grave. I saw the coffin open on its own. It did not open. It knocked. Once. He swallowed. I have served here 27 years. I thought the dead were quiet because they were at peace. Some were quiet because no one asked the right question. Pell handed me a folded document. The original seal, withdrawal ledger. Merrow had ordered him to burn it. Pell had hidden it beneath the gatehouse prayer stone. The ledger showed that Merrow's personal assistant signed out the 12 seals at 9:30 on the night of my arrest. The evidence box listed them as recovered from me at 12:06. Chain of custody broken. Chart destroyed. Pell signed a statement. Not because he became brave. Because Merrow had started sacrificing subordinates, and cowardice had finally changed direction. I accepted the document. Then I asked the question that mattered. Who opened Orrin's grave? Pell closed his eyes. Toma was ordered to prepare it for inspection. Toma looked up sharply. I received no order. Your name was used, Pell said. The work was done by Merrow's private groundsman. That connected the false inspection, planted seals, and opened grave directly to Merrow. By 11:30, we had everything. The black ledger. The seal withdrawal record. Pell's testimony. Amias's corrected statement, submitted with 14 minutes to spare. 3 ghost witnesses to the forged death certificate. 163 verified spirits tied to stolen pensions. And 254 others whose names I remembered, but had not yet restored. They did not all need to appear. The power was not in spectacle. It was in scale. At 11:50, the bells summoned the capital to the Hall of Remembrance. The hall stood at the cemetery center beneath a glass dome. 5 enormous burial ledgers rested on stone platforms. Noble officers filled the front rows. Military families crowded the galleries. Treasury judges, foreign envoys, royal advocates, and palace ministers occupied raised benches. Merrow stood beside the central ledger, wearing full ceremonial robes. Gold this time. He looked like a man who believed clothing could outvote evidence. When I entered with Toma, the hall quieted. The dead came with us. At first, only 40 were visible. They formed the archive wall along the aisle. Then Vesa appeared carrying the black ledger. The temperature fell. One by one, pale figures filled the spaces behind the living audience. Soldiers stood beside widows who could not see them. Medics gathered near the royal physicians. Stable hands appeared beneath noble cavalry banners. By noon, the Hall of Remembrance contained more dead citizens than living officials. Merrow watched them assemble. For the first time since I had known him, he looked exactly as frightened as he deserved to be. The ceremony began with music. That was tradition. The royal choir sang about sacrifice, eternal honor, and the crown's unbroken promises to those who served. Behind them stood 163 people, whose promises had been broken in carefully filed installments. I wondered whether Merrow appreciated the irony. The Minister of Remembrance gave a speech lasting 18 minutes. Then the 5 military ledgers were opened. Archive seals flared blue beneath the glass dome. The presiding royal judge invited unresolved claims. Merrow stepped forward immediately. That was his final strategy. Control the opening statement. "Your Honors," he said, "recent events have created confusion regarding unauthorized spirit manifestations and potentially corrupted records. For the dignity of the ceremony, I request that all disputed materials be removed for private examination." Private. His favorite word after verified. The judge looked toward me. I raised one hand. Objection under Cemetery Law 14. Murmurs moved through the galleries. Merrow continued, as if I had not spoken. Clerk Vale is under active criminal investigation and has demonstrated improper use of a necromantic artifact. The judge checked the docket. The seal theft charge was dismissed at 11:42 this morning. That was news to Merrow. His head turned toward Deputy Warden Pell. Pell did not meet his eyes. The judge continued. Unauthorized excavation charges have been redirected to the Office of Cemetery Security. Clerk Vale's record correction has been provisionally upheld. Merrow's face remained composed. Only the vein near his temple betrayed him. I stepped into the central circle. The Archive Quill floated above my palm. My claim concerns 417 deceased military servants whose names, death dates, beneficiaries, or service records were altered to redirect pension payments. The hall erupted. The judge struck the sounding stone 3 times. Silence returned slowly. Merrow smiled. 417 sounded impossible. That was why I used the number first. "Clerk Vale," he said, "you cannot possibly verify 417 historical claims." Not alone. I looked toward the dead. "Sergeant Orrin Cauldron, will you stand?" He appeared beside me. Corporal Jessa Venn. She joined him. Banner Medic Halric Sorn. Then Loran Pell. Rila Das. Marin Ash. Cora Tane. One by one, I called names. I did not call all 417, only those already verified. The visible line expanded across the hall. 40, 80, 100, 163. Every spirit wore the marks of service, torn coats, faded insignia, spectral satchels, broken shields, bent medical clasps. No gore. No rage. Just witnesses. Merrow's legal advocate rose. "Manifestation does not establish identity." "Correct," I said. I restored the first record. Orrin Cauldron's brass nameplate appeared in white light above the central ledger. His service number, regiment, widow, and pension promise followed. Then Jessa's. Then Halrick. The Archive Quill connected each identity to an official burial record. Blue certification seals flared. The dead were not random spirits. They were citizens recognized by the Crown's own archive magic. The judge leaned forward. Proceed. I presented the forged Brenford death certificate. 3 witnesses testified. The false physician's signature dissolved in public. Captain Edric Vey, now 61, and seated among the honored officers, tried to leave. The archive wall blocked the aisle. He was not harmed. He simply found that every direction led back to his chair. Vey confessed before I reached the 4th question. He admitted Merrow ordered the delayed death entries. In return, Vey's gambling debts had been paid through a cemetery supply account. Merrow's advocate demanded a recess. Denied. I presented the seal withdrawal ledger. Pell testified. Amias confirmed that Merrow ordered me into the pension archives before accusing me of unauthorized access. Then Vessa Crow entered the central circle. Merrow stopped pretending. That woman is a criminal, he said. Vessa looked at him. The iron marks around her wrists were gone. Yes, she said, I was. Her voice carried through the hall without amplification. I created 23 false custodial funds. I signed 417 unlawful pension transfers. I concealed 5 annual treasury reports. I did so under Lord Archivist Merrow's instruction, and for 11 years I accepted payment. The nobles leaned closer. Confessions fascinated them when they belonged to someone else. Vessa placed the black ledger on the central platform. I attempted to disclose the accounts. Lord Merrow prevented me. Merrow pointed at the ledger. Fabrication. The royal judge ordered it opened. Gold account lines spread into the air. Every transfer appeared above the hall. Names. Amounts. Dates. Destination accounts. Merrow's seal. The River Veterans Custodial Fund. The Maritime Loss Fund. The Unclaimed Cavalry Trust. The Northern Widows Reserve. All controlled through companies owned by Merrow's relatives, assistants, or dead household servants. Treasury examiners began reading totals. 3,804,672 crowns in stolen principal. 2,119,406 crowns in unpaid interest. 11 estates. 4 warehouses. 2 barges. 31 bond certificates. 1 vineyard. At the vineyard, someone in the gallery laughed. It spread before the judge silenced it. Merrow stood rigidly beside the open ledger. He had always looked impressive in official halls because everyone else treated his authority as solid. Now we could see what supported it. Forged signatures. Stolen names. Dead widows. Paper walls. His advocate whispered to him. Merrow shook him off. This evidence was obtained through coercion. The archive quill went still. I looked at him. The dead cannot be compelled by this instrument. You expect us to accept that? No, I said. I expect the quill to answer. I placed it on the ledger. Have I forced any verified witness to testify? Nothing happened for 2 seconds. Then 163 voices answered. No. Not shouted. Not screamed. Spoken together. The glass dome trembled. Every burial ledger in the hall turned a page by itself. The royal judge rose. Under cemetery law, unanimous testimony by 40 or more verified military dead created a sovereign archive assembly. It had not occurred in 312 years. A sovereign archive assembly could suspend any cemetery official, freeze disputed inheritance and pension accounts, and place testimony directly before the Crown without administrative filtering. Merrow had never believed anyone could summon one. He had based 22 years of theft on that assumption. The 40 spirits of my defensive wall stepped forward. Then another 40. Then another. They arranged themselves in silent ranks behind me. Not an army in the ordinary sense. A legion of legal standing. Oath-bound witnesses. Spiritual guardians. People who had been denied the dignity of records and had returned to enforce them. The judge looked toward Merrow. "Lord Archivist, surrender your cemetery chain." Merrow did not move. The chain removed itself. It lifted from his shoulders and crossed the hall into the judge's hand. The gold embroidery on Merrow's robes dimmed. His archive authority collapsed. Every stolen oath attached to his office withdrew at once. He suddenly looked smaller. Not physically. Accurately. "You cannot do this," he said. The judge's expression was cold. The dead appeared to disagree. Merrow turned to me. "Not the judge. Not the ministers. Me. I gave you that position. You gave me a basement desk and 18 crowns a week. I protected you. You framed me for execution. No execution occurred." The words left his mouth before he understood them. The hall went silent. He had admitted knowledge of the planned sentence. His advocate sat down. Merrow looked around at the nobles who had once dined at his estate. Not one met his eyes. The treasury seized his accounts before the ceremony ended. The military court detained Captain Vey. The royal cemetery suspended 14 senior officials. Every one of the 417 pension cases was ordered reopened. And I stood beneath the glass dome with the dead at my back, alive in a place where I remembered dying. I did not smile. Not because I lacked satisfaction. Because Orrin Cauldron was watching his widow's name return to the ledger. Some victories deserve silence. Merrow requested a private conversation 3 hours after his arrest. Naturally. Men like him considered privacy a basic human right when facing consequences and an unnecessary luxury when arranging them for others. The royal investigators placed him in the same quarantine room where he had offered me permanent record service. I entered with Toma and 4 spectral witnesses. Merrow sat at the table without his cemetery chain. His robes had been replaced with a plain gray detainee coat. It suited him better than neutrality blue or ceremonial gold. He looked at Toma. "This is a confidential, legal discussion. Toma is my record custodian. He is a gravekeeper." "Exactly." Toma stood near the door, expression calm. Merrow folded his hands. "I can explain the accounts." "I'm sure you can." The military pension system was collapsing when I took office. Funds were scattered across obsolete trusts. Families could not be located. Officers submitted contradictory casualty reports. "So you bought a vineyard." His jaw tightened. "I consolidated assets. Into your name. To preserve them. From widows." He exhaled slowly. "I made mistakes." That was almost impressive. More than 6 million crowns in theft, reduced to administrative weather. He leaned forward. "You do not understand what happens if the full network is exposed. I understand 417 families were robbed. There are nobles involved, generals, treasury officials, 2 royal cousins. Then the hearing rooms will be busy. They will destroy the cemetery to protect themselves. The cemetery is full of people they already failed to destroy." For the first time, he looked past me at the ghosts. Orrin stood with his arms folded. Jessa watched Merrow without expression. Vessa held the black ledger against her chest. Merrow lowered his voice. "I can give you names. I have names. Living names. I will accept a sworn statement." "In exchange for what?" "Nothing." He blinked. I am offering cooperation. You are offering information, because cooperation may reduce your sentence. You could recommend leniency. I could. Hope entered his face. I let it remain for 1 second. I will not. His expression hardened. Then why would I help? You may decide not to. The quill only records willing testimony. He stared at me. There was the central difference between us. Merrow believed every action required leverage over another person. Payment, threat, status, fear. He could not understand choosing truth after it stopped being profitable. He changed tactics. Senior Archivist, he said. I almost laughed. What? I can secure the appointment. The ministry needs stability. You have demonstrated unusual ability. With my recommendation, you could become the youngest senior archivist in royal history. You no longer hold office. My allies do. Some of them are currently denying they know you. His mouth thinned. Then money, 1 estate, 2. The Northern Warehouse earns 40,000 crowns annually. Those assets belong to the pension claimants. You cannot distribute everything. The system will consume half in administration. Then we will change the system. You think they will let you? I looked at the 4 ghosts. They let you steal for 22 years because the dead were silent. That condition has changed. Merrow sat back. You enjoy this? It was not a question. I considered my answer carefully. I enjoy being alive. His gaze dropped. Good. I continued. I enjoy Oren Cauldron's widow being recognized. I enjoy Vessa's confession being recorded completely instead of conveniently. I enjoy Toma standing inside the cemetery rather than being buried outside it. Toma looked at me. Merrow did too. He did not know about that timeline. He could not. But something in my voice told him it had been possible. I do not enjoy you, I said. You are paperwork. That hurt him more than anger would have. Merrow had built his identity around being the most important man in every room. Reducing him to case file was the only cruelty I allowed myself. He refused to testify that day. He changed his mind 36 hours later, when the Treasury connected his personal seal to the Northern Widows' Reserve. His statement named 18 collaborators. The quill recorded it because he gave it willingly, even if willingness arrived wearing fear. I recommended no leniency. I also recommended no extraordinary punishment. The law was enough. Merrow lost his title, estates, accounts, pension, licenses, and hereditary seat on the Royal Records Council. The military tribunal sentenced him to 27 years of supervised restitution work, not memory-stripped service. I opposed that. Erasing his mind would have made the institution more like him. Instead, he was assigned to calculate survivor repayments under guard, with every figure checked by Vessa's restored accounting office. He spent his days writing the names he had tried to erase. Captain Vale lost his commission and 3 estates. Deputy Warden Pell was removed from security authority, but allowed to remain as an ordinary grounds supervisor after testifying and surrendering the hidden ledger. Amias kept his position. He also received 417 reopening files. I considered that educational. The noble families involved in the scheme tried to blame Merrow alone. The Black Ledger disagreed. Treasury seizures spread through the capital for 6 weeks. Warehouses changed ownership. Bonds were liquidated. 2 river barges were sold. Merrow's vineyard became a veterans cooperative. Toma insisted the first bottle produced there should be poured over Oren's grave. Oren's ghost approved. The pension repayments took longer. Some beneficiaries had died. Some had moved. Some lines ended entirely. Under ordinary law, unclaimed restitution returned to the Crown. I objected. The Sovereign Archive Assembly supported me. The funds instead created the Forgotten Service Trust, which paid for grave restoration, survivor searches, and legal representation for poor military families. The Crown publicly described this as a visionary reform. Privately, the Treasury hated me. That was when I knew I was doing useful work. 3 months after the memorial ceremony, the Royal Cemetery offered me Merrow's position. I declined. The minister thought I was negotiating. He offered a larger residence, 200 crowns a week, a ceremonial carriage, and private access to the noble crypt gardens. I declined again. "What do you want?" he asked. "An independent office of verified dead testimony." His face went pale. That sounded expensive. It was. I requested 12 living clerks, 6 gravekeepers, 3 pension advocates, 2 spirit law judges, 1 public waiting room, and authority to audit any death-linked contract in the capital. I also requested that Toma become chief custodian of graves. The minister looked at Toma's muddy boots. Toma looked at the minister's polished ones. The dead filled the corridor behind us. The office was approved. We moved into a former mausoleum near the western gate. It had thick walls, good light, and no living noble wanted it. Perfect. Toma redesigned the entrance so grieving families did not have to walk through administrative counters before reaching the memorial garden. Vessa became our spectral account examiner. She could not leave the cemetery grounds, but she could review 90 years of pension fraud without sleeping, which made her more productive than most Treasury departments. Oren served as the first witness representative. Jessa organized the military dead by regiment. Halric refused all titles and spent his time guiding newly awakened spirits away from panic. The Archive Quill remained limited. That mattered. It still refused to write unless a dead person willingly testified. Some cases remained unresolved. Some spirits did not remember clearly. Some wanted privacy more than justice. Some forgave people I would not have forgiven. Others refused forgiveness entirely. My authority could summon verified witnesses, build protective archive walls, preserve testimony against magical destruction, and enforce standing inside death-related hearings. It could not make the dead convenient. That was why they trusted it. My cultivation continued with every completed record. At 200 restored names, I could hear broken oaths within 30 paces. At 300, I could enter sealed burial archives without a physical key if a verified witness invited me. At 417, the Silent Legion formed completely. Not always visible, not always gathered, but present. 417, oathbound, dead, recognized me as their archivist. When someone attempted to forge a death-linked contract in the capital, the quill grew warm. When officials tried to intimidate families at inheritance hearings, spectral soldiers appeared behind my chair. When noble advocates objected to unsettling displays, I reminded them that accurate witnesses were rarely decorative. My reputation became inconveniently dramatic. The capital newspapers called me the White Quill Necromancer. The military families called me Archivist Vale. The nobles called me several things they did not say within cemetery grounds. Children started daring one another to knock on my office door after sunset. I kept sweets in the second drawer for the brave ones. Toma continued repairing graves, even after promotion. He claimed the title chief custodian did not make stones straighten themselves. On the first anniversary of the hearing, we walked to Oren's grave carrying a bottle from the veteran's vineyard. His brass plate now displayed his full name. Beneath it were his regiment, 19 years of service, and the restored name of his wife. Mara Cauldron had died 12 years before my regression. We found her grave in a poor district outside the city and moved no remains. Instead, we linked the burial records so their names appeared together in both places. The dead cared less about physical distance than the living assumed. Toma poured the wine. Oren appeared beside the marker. He looked healthier now, more complete. That happened when a spirit's unresolved contracts were settled. You could rest, I told him. He nodded. He could. He chose to remain. Not because I bound him. Because other soldiers were still waiting for names. Toma sat on the grass. You know, he said, most people who return from death look for treasure. I found a quill. Others find legendary swords. I have no training. Secret cultivation manuals. Too many diagrams. Royal bloodlines. Absolutely not. He smiled. The evening bells rang across the cemetery. Lanterns glowed between the graves. Families moved along the paths, leaving flowers, polished buttons, military ribbons, carved toys, and cups of tea. The cemetery no longer felt silent. It felt listened to. I sometimes thought about the first timeline. About the cell. The execution courtyard. The moment the blade fell, while Merrow watched from beneath a black umbrella. I remembered the helplessness most clearly. Not pain. The certainty that the truth existed and did not matter because no one powerful wanted to hear it. Regression did not erase that life. It gave it jurisdiction. Merrow once asked whether I enjoyed his downfall. The honest answer was complicated. I did not enjoy that 417 people had to rise from their graves to receive what should have been given freely. I did not enjoy how quickly respectable officials abandoned Merrow once his protection became expensive. I did not enjoy knowing the law had always contained a remedy, hidden beneath 3 centuries of dust, while families starved. But I enjoyed the consequences. Not because they were cruel. Because they were exact. The accounts were seized. The pensions were restored. The names returned. The officials who treated the dead as empty entries learned that a record was not lifeless merely because its owner had stopped breathing. As for me, I became the most feared necromantic archivist in the capital. That description always made me sound taller. I was still 5 feet 4 inches, still disliked public speeches, and still earned less than several palace florists. But when I entered a hearing, fraudulently dead heirs sat up straighter. When I opened a ledger, corrupt trustees checked the exits. When someone claimed a forgotten soldier had no voice, 417 silent witnesses stood behind me. In my first life, Lord Merrow erased people because he believed death ended their right to object. In my second, I learned that death was not the end of a person's record. It was only the moment the final witness became impossible to intimidate.